Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Working for You. I am Lesroy Williams. I thank you very much for joining us for our program today. We continue to inform you and to update you in terms of what is happening in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. On the 19th of this month, it was World International Day of Men. International Day of Men, and it's a global commemoration to highlight the achievements of men and also discrimination of men. Men are discriminated against, men and boys, but we are not here just to speak about that. We are here to speak about the issues pertaining to men, and today we are going to address some of those issues, particularly health issues, mental issues, and so on. But it would be all about men. We are not here to talk about women today, but I find it very difficult to speak about men and not speak about women, because sometimes women keep men in check in terms of their health issues and things like that. I have with me two gentlemen. I have on my left, I have Mr. Nevis, and I have Dr. Jonathan Carty. I don't know where Kyle came from.
That's my middle name.
Oh, that's your middle name.
Yes.
Okay, so I will ask these gentlemen to say something about themselves, and I will first start with Mr. Nittal.
Good day. I'm Nevis Nittal, as Mr. Williams would have indicated. I'm a chemist by studies. I'm a holder, recently completed a law degree at the University of London. I'm a forensic psychologist. My understanding that I may be the only one in the Federation that is right on board. And I'm currently pursuing doctoral studies in clinical psychology, which I'm expecting to complete by next year. I'm currently attached to National Drug Council, and I operate as a prevention officer. In the year to come, new year to come, I'll be doing more counseling of these young people because there's an urgent need for such. And I'm looking forward to a steamy discussion
Right.
along with Dr. Cat, but we share quite a few things in common. So without any further ado, I will have this introduction piece moderated accordingly by Mr. Williams.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Nittal. I would invite Dr. Carty to tell us a little bit about himself.
Okay, good afternoon, panelists, and to our viewers and listeners out there. As previously mentioned, I'm Dr. Jonathan Carty, and I'm a general practitioner currently working at the Accident and Emergency Department at the Jennifer Farnes General Hospital. And it is my pleasure to be here this evening to discuss some of the most important issues that are affecting us men today, not just in our society, but globally.
Okay. Right, so I began by saying that International Men's Day was celebrated on the 19th of November. And it is a day that is basically set aside to highlight the issues of men, particularly the contribution of men to society, and also some of the problems associated with men. Of course, we know one of the things that we always hear is that men don't take enough care of themselves in terms of going to the doctor,
Right.
looking after themselves, and so on, as opposed to women,
Right.
because they say that women have, are more in touch with their bodies and looking after themselves than men.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
Right. So, Dr. Carty, what are some of the issues with respect to health when it comes to men?
Okay.
And how men view themselves in relation to their health?
Okay. Well, first and foremost, let me begin by saying that we as men, and there are men that struggle with their mental illness and their physical illness, and these types of struggles are preventing us from going out and asking for help and seeking treatments in a timely manner to prevent the progression of further diseases. And it is killing us because we are ignoring the stigma that are surrounding many of the diseases that affects us as men, like mental diseases, HIV and AIDS. We also have hypertension, diabetes, prostate cancer, which is one of the most cancers that affect men. And in this global pandemic, COVID-19, which we see it affecting both men and women, but how we deal with it differs greatly on the sexes. So, but there is good news because we can now take control of our health by using preventative measures. We can eat healthily, we can have regular checkups, we can visit the doctors, so it will allow us to have a longer and healthier lifestyle. Mm-hmm. So some other healthcare issues that we may go through may be erectile dysfunction, heart disease. We also have, like I said, the mental illness that affects us not only in our society but internationally.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think, Dr. Carty, that women are known to take better care of their health than men?
Well, that's mainly due to the stigma that is surrounding men in terms of their health, because we have fallen victim to the false idea that we as men always have to be strong enough to be able to solve all of our problems on our own. And women, in comparison, recognize that there's an issue, they accept that they have a problem, and they go forward and they seek advice, they seek treatment, whereas we as men sometimes don't even admit that there is a problem. So we will have our women going forward more frequently than men, because we feel that mental illness or any other physical condition will be a sign of vulnerability, a sign of weakness, and it will cause us to lose power or interest or even favoritism amongst our family, friends, or even in the workplace. So that discrimination and that stigma and that false idea that we always have to be strong is what's crippling us as men today.
Nitel, do you think that admitting that one is ill, going to the doctor, taking a prostate test as a man is a sign of vulnerability and weakness?
There is something called masculinity expectations. And as persons, men grow, their peers will let them to know that it is a sign of weakness for you to subject yourself to certain tests, including the prostate testing. But you asked him a question that I want to piggyback on a bit as to why women are more forthcoming to seek medical attention than men. If you, the lady, I call her the lady of the home, is usually responsible for nurturing babies, and as such they have to take cues. A cough, a cry, and certain different type of cries and the intensity and the longevity of the cry would send a signal to the mother. So they're always on the lookout. What can be wrong with my baby? Because to nurture someone from the very time that they see their light up to 18, 20, 21, it's a very artistic affair, and you have to be in tune. And due to that particular aspect that females are attached to, it carries over to themselves, because if they're not fully taken care of simultaneously, then the child could not benefit, because it is seen that in our culture where the males would be an integral part of the nurturing of the babies. Some guys cannot even hold a baby properly, you understand? And they feel very awkward and clumsy trying to hold. You will see a mother giving a father a young baby to hold, and they start breathing heavily because they wanted to make sure they're not squeezing the baby, they're not having the baby in an awkward position, the baby can breathe properly, and as such it would come with the territory of what the role of the woman is in the house. that would further by extrapolation taken to the doctors to make sure that they are all right, in order to make sure that the babies would be nurtured properly, for they have to be around. They don't have any faith and confidence in that sometimes.
Now, a lot of it has to do with gender and gender socialization, how we are socialized into, male roles and female roles. And we often hear that boys don't cry, and that crying is basically for little girls, and things like that. So we are told that you're not supposed to at least publicly show anything that would be a sign of weakness or vulnerability. And so we bottle things up inside and think that we can take care of it ourselves. Self-care. Self-care. When basically to abandon yourself into the hands of somebody else to look after you is probably seen as a sign of weakness and vulnerability, and so sometimes men do not reach out. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. That's exactly the stigma that is facing us today. We have the false ideas that we can quickly resolve our problems on our own and move on to the next. And not reaching out for help or assistance will cause us to, as you mentioned, self-treat, self-medicate, turn to drugs and alcohol to solve the problem, because we don't want to admit that we need help. We don't want to seek that advice because we look down as, okay, you're supposed to be strong, you're supposed to be in control, you're supposed to be able to, fix your problem as the man, whether it be of the house, of the office, and not be defeated by diseases. Mm-hmm. So that's how our society views us as men.
Right. Now, Nitel, he mentioned in terms of, instead of admitting, for example, that one has a problem, a health problem, they may start to self-medicate. They may turn to substances, they may turn to alcohol, they may turn to other forms of drugs and things like that. Now, that is the beginning really of, it starts with the mental health, the mind.
Yes.
And how can that really be addressed?
You have something called cognitive processing therapy, where a therapist would work with an individual who seems to be experiencing that said condition that you're referring to. And the thing is to substitute unpleasant thoughts with more functional and pleasant ones. You also have cognitive behavior therapy, of which cognitive processing therapy is a subset. And once you can organize the person to seek help, sometimes a friend or family member might, sometimes we try to bully people into getting treatment, when we should change that culture of bullying and sort of massage them. Come on, let us go together. Don't tell somebody, come go to the doctor, you need help. You have to say, let us go together. But the problem is that males do not see themselves as being compelled to listen to girlfriends. If you have a wife, sometimes the wife herself will experience problems in getting a husband to go to the doctor to check out what's going on, to do some screening. Much less a mere girlfriend. Relationships would have gone, would have deteriorated as a result of persons encouraging people to go for medical testing, screening. Right? Because we have a culture of people want to know.
Right.
You have some person who don't care to know about the HIV status.
Right.
They prefer not to know. That is their comfort zone. That is their comfort zone. And to get them out of there is quite a Herculean effort. And I do not understand why you would not want to know. It is better for you to know whether it is positive and you take stand to protect yourself and to protect others. And maybe there's a need for education, because even with the HIV, there's medication now that can bring it down to such a level that you can get involved in sexual activities without impacting the other. So sometimes it's education.
Right.
Lack of education would always create barriers, hurdles for us with respect to getting through to men. Education is the key.
Right.
Dr. Curtis, some of the issues surrounding men of their physical health, do you think it has to do with not being comfortable with your body, or not being in touch with your body, not really being in touch with your feelings and things like that? For example, there are some issues that speak to a man's ego. For example, things like erectile dysfunction. If a man is experiencing erectile dysfunction, he may feel a sense of shame of going to the doctor and admitting that, because that speaks to his manhood.
Right. I agree.
If a man may tell you he is not taking any sort of a prostate exam because it involves a rectal examination,
Right,
and somehow he's homophobic.
Yes.
And some of these kinds of things that can hinder men really taking care of themselves.
I actually agree with you on those two matters, because we are afraid of being sick and going to the doctor because we don't want to expose our bodies. We don't want to be put in a position where we have to open up to whether it be a male doctor or a female doctor, because of the shame that we may experience, or of the, it's just that the uncertainty, as Nita mentioned, the lack of education of what certain diseases and that can do to the body. In terms of the prostate screening, it is one of the most taboo topics as it relates, between us men, because as you mentioned, it involves the rectal digital exam, with Dr. will place his lubricated glove finger through the rectum and explore the prostate. So he may be, as you mentioned, homophobic and don't want a guy doctor or even a female doctor to, in a sense, cross borders or go overboard in touching them, because it will make them feel funny, it will make them feel bad, or make them start to have negative ideas towards that. And that sort of thinking in this day and age is outdated. It's a relic of previous generations, because it doesn't speak to the current medical understanding, the current understanding of certain diseases. And the quicker you do certain tests, the better it is for you to get over it and get appropriate treatment, a timely treatment. So it has a lot to do with we not being comfortable with our own body, because we don't want to be in that vulnerable position on the table in front of a doctor, whether it be male or female, and have to be exposed our genital areas or rectal area to such examinations. So yeah, I do agree with you. We are not comfortable with ourselves. We're not.
I would like to come in here too. Sometimes it's a matter of confidentiality. Sometimes you have some breaches. And when confidentiality is breached, then you put back persons in their shell.
Right.
Sometimes you assume that it is a professional affair, a relationship between you and your provider, treatment provider, your healthcare provider. But yet you hear something that only you and your healthcare provider ought to have known. Well, that put back persons in their shell. You mentioned something a while ago with respect to erectile dysfunction. And our culture has a way of reminding you. Singing songs, they might not approach you, but they might sing a song as you pass. The late Bad Towel had a song, My Husband Titty Die Die.
Right.
That was a popular song. Mick Stokes had one shot, one shot man. And persons, when they get the information, they indirectly would attack you in public,
Right.
especially if there's some falling out. But the danger of this now, when one is pushed into a shell in relation to erectile dysfunction, they go and they procure tablets. Sometimes the instructions are in a language that they would never understand. And I find it to be very unfortunate, because that is something that the government would have to look into. We have too many of those type of tablets on the market without instructions in English.
if you get the English conversion, you would say, well, this will last in your system for 72 hours.
Right.
But a fellow feels as though if he takes 2, he will perform like a tiger. And as such, persons experience heart problems
Right.
because they have gone way above the dosage.
Okay.
One tablet is supposed to last 72 hours, that's 3 days. But the feeling more they take is the better they perform.
And in addition to that, that is why I encourage all my patients, both male and female, especially the males, when I feel that they may be hiding something from me or not feeling comfortable enough to express what they're feeling, I will go down to their level of like, okay, this is doctor-patient confidentiality. What happens here is only going to be between me and you, so you don't have to worry about no one else outside this door or outside this hospital knowing, because it is not for me to go and tell, and it's not for you to disclose your private medical issues. So I create this sort of safe zone so that patients can open up and actually express what is it they have been experiencing and what is it they're going through. Because as Nital just said, some men just prefer to turn to self-medication, which will further damage their systems and create even more health problems than they may have had.
Mm-hmm. And as you correctly said, it's sometimes a social commentary prevents men from really taking care of themselves and adds to that sense of shame that they may have about their own bodies. For example, he spoke about certain Calypsonians, one-shot man. Sparrow had a song called Willie Dead.
Willie Dead. Willie Dead.
Willie
Oh,
Dead.
Willie Dead, oh, yes.
Yeah, you know, and that those sorts of issues that add to men not really taking care of themselves.
Right.
There's a sense of shame, and then he also may sometimes women as well use those kinds of things to shame men.
Mm-hmm.
And so they will go to the whole world and they will tell people, their friends and shame you and say, boy, you can't come up.
Right.
And those kinds of things. And it's really embarrassing.
Yes, it is. And it's
in the public.
It is.
Yes,
and
it is embarrassing.
And discrimination, that is what's going to put us more and more in the shell and prevent us from going and seeking medical attention.
Right.
Because we don't want to be shamed. No one wants to be told that they can't achieve an erection when it's time to, or they can't perform. It is embarrassing from a standpoint of being a man.
Right.
So that is why they will have that fear of going to seek that help.
And they can be helped.
And it goes against the grain of your physical body, because if you go to the gym and you have this well-built body, but somehow you cannot carry your conjugal duties, it becomes a whole story within the gym, and persons will be laughing after you, and you become so apprehensive about going to the gym, and you decide you stop. So you just steady and you gather the weight, and then gathering weight is another episode of health diseases.
Right.
Now, what are some of the lifestyles of men that lead to particular health issues that have to do with men?
Well, a lot of has to do with our eating habits, our toxic habits. Taking in diets with high cholesterol, high saturated fat, a lot of alcohol, smoking, becoming obese will cause us to not only develop erectile dysfunction, we will lead to heart diseases, hypertension, diabetes, and all those are major health factors that can be potentially life-threatening. So one will need to take a stock and take control of your daily activities, not just physically, but look at what we eat and look at our toxic habits as well. And even certain types of drugs, prescribed medication, can have a profound effect on our health, because one may become addicted to these prescribed medication. A course of antibiotics normally would run for maybe a week, 2 week stops, and then the person may be like, okay, this makes me feel really good. So they may seek, go to other doctors to seek in this same medication to continuously have that good feeling, and then it will further damage their system, because the work was already done, but yet they want to continue just because of the secondary effect of that medication. So it has a lot to do with self-control and taking a stock on, how we live our daily lives.
Would it be true to say that in our society that more men drink and smoke than women?
I would say yes. What you find happening too with respect to drug use or substance usage is that males start earlier than females. And the statistics would have shown that the females, however, they relapse easier than the males. Socialization has a lot to do with it, because if you're socializing with some guys and the masculinity expectations, if Peter and Paul smoking and little Sam comes along, he would have to start smoking as well.
Right.
And sometimes they're not. I just wish that we can, just also we have an age for drinking. I don't know if it is well policed, but we need to put an age for smoking. I don't believe anybody at all should start smoking before they're 21. I like to say 25, but some persons find me a bit harsh, because science would have shown that the brain is not fully developed until around the age of 25. And if you're not going to protect those persons from smoking before they're 25, it can create some problems for us, because they become a bit aggressive, they lose interest in their schoolwork, the friendship, the relationship just seem to be deteriorated because we're not controlling that. The government could formulate some policies. Just like how we started opening up this marijuana stuff, we must have it accompanied by laws specific to persons under 25 or under 21, unless we're going to end up in some serious problem. Right. Because the funny thing is that even though people talk about the benefits to be had from the usage of marijuana, they're smoking it. Marijuana has quite a number of chemicals. And when you put fire to chemicals, you provide the necessary threshold of energy for a chemical reaction to take place. So I usually would say to them, you don't even know what you're smoking. Because if you mix an acid and an alkali, you get salt and water. But what about when you light those 70-something, 170-something, 200-something chemicals? You don't know what products are formed. So when you smoke marijuana, you do not actually know what you are consuming. If you put it in some hot water, you draw it, you could say, okay, if it's 100 different chemicals, I take it in 100. But when you light it, that 100 can turn into tens of thousands of different products. Right. And how could a doctor look after you if you are impacted by the automatic generation of different byproducts? And that is the problem. We have the smoking. And then we have our alveoli that are being clogged. Right. With the different small particles there, the alveoli, and then they start to cough and they start to do so many things. And it become a burden for them because they feel uncomfortable amongst other people. So they stick with their peers, and the most the peers do is encourage them to smoke more. And then it becomes a gateway drug, because you'll have to smoke so much to maintain what they call a high. And it's not really a high. There'll be one time when I do a program, I will explain that. They call it a high because it's a different feeling. But actually it is a low. With respect to the physiological being of the individual, it is a low. And it is a gateway drug into more. And you find that the youngsters around here, or maybe worldwide, they feel that they would have arrived if they start drinking as well. Right. So you have a double jeopardy there. They're smoking when they should not be smoking before 25. And they're overly consuming alcohol. An awful combination.
Yes, what you mentioned is a very good point, because some think it's an initiation into manhood. And that is what being a man is. I'm smoking and I'm drinking, which is far from the truth. We have a prevalence in our society among our young people of smoking marijuana. Now, Mr. Nittel, what you just said is not the thinking of many young people, that marijuana causes damage to their health. In other words, they think that smoking marijuana is cool, and that smoking marijuana, there's nothing wrong with it. It's okay. It's an acceptable lifestyle, and as you mentioned, some of the mental health issues that it can create, and physical health issues that it can also create. And I have been told that marijuana can affect also a person's sexual health. The smoking of marijuana. Is that true?
That is true.
Mm-hmm.
It could. Well, the thing is, when it comes to marijuana and alcohol, a lot of persons don't know that they have risk of addiction. They don't even know, may not even know what is addiction. And based on the National Institute of Drug Abuse, they define this addiction as the chronic relapsing disorder characterized by compulsive drug seeking and use despite the adverse consequences. And as Nita mentioned, it has effects on the brain. It damages it affects your reward center. It makes you feel invincible, so to speak, like you're on cloud 9, as they normally say. But while it's doing that, it's also damaging the brain cells. It is affecting your lungs, it's affecting your heart, it's affecting the arteries, and then you have this domino effect where all of the organs would be affected by this consumption of the multiple chemicals, as he mentioned, and they won't be aware of that because they're enjoying the high. So when they realize that, okay, I have a problem, might be too late. They might go to the doctor when they realize they can't breathe, or they're having heart palpitations, or even worse, stroke or a heart attack. And all that could be secondary to marijuana use or other substance abuse. So it does damage the health. And most persons aren't aware because the education is not there showing them that, okay, you do this, because everything is in moderation. You do this too much, it will lead to that. And it won't affect you the way it would affect me. So I can't look at you and say, oh, you're smoking 10 times a day, so I can do it too. No. You will smoke 10 times a day and be perfectly fine for the next 10 years. I will smoke 1 pack a day and be dead by tomorrow. So you can't really look at, because these drugs and alcohol affects people's body differently, because our chemical buildup is completely different as it goes from individual to individuals. So while they're enjoying the typical high, as Nita mentioned, they are destroying their body inside out.
Now, Mr. Little, what are some of the common mental health issues? What do you think that some of those are? Now, you would have done psychology, you're a forensic psychologist. What are some of the things that you have encountered and experienced in your work?
You have anxiety and depression. But what you find most is that a lot of youngsters around here, because of the extent of socialization, they would have been exposed, because like Dr. Cathy said, they feel invincible. So they go and they confront people. And sometimes you find somebody might be severely injured, or it might even lead to death. And as a result of that, with a conscience is that part where God is actually saying, you can't resist this, eventually it will come out. Their conscience seemed to be diluted at that time, and they start to experience what you call post-traumatic stress disorder. Because once you're being exposed to a traumatic event, then just almost anywhere you go, they will have to avoid places, things, and situations that will cause them to remember what took place before. And this thing will go on for more than a month. If it happened just a week or 2 weeks, but once it go over a month, that is one of the diagnostic criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder. And they would not seek help. Sometimes the help is just maybe a 12-week session with a therapist. But who would tell them that? Because first of all, there is no screening. Right. If you don't screen, it just may be observation. Okay, Dr. Cathy might have an eye for it. I might have a lens to say, well, something is happening. But who else would be looking out? And then if you look out and you realize that, could you approach these people and suggest that, look, you need a little help? We just need our counselors at the schools, because it's starting at a younger age, I saw a video with a youngster, 8 years, smoking, and he's smoking as if he's smoking for over 20 years. Wow. I went in search of that individual. I found him, and I took him by my home for 8 days. 8 days. And I realized that he had a problem. How many persons would realize something like that and try to rescue, intervene, and cause some corrective measures to be taken? Sometimes you offend people. Some parents, if you tell them that the children, one time at Bastia High School, I told a parent that I'm convinced that your child is smoking. You don't, and the this and that and that, don't be fouled in my child. The father came in, and I said the same thing to the father. Father said, no, man, you're taking this thing too far. I said, let us do something. Let us call the child. The father asked him, do you smoke? He said, yes, on a daily basis. Where do you get it from? I get it from Mr. X. I do certain chores for him, and he supplied me with my weed on a daily basis. And you could imagine that? How long have you been smoking for? Over 5 years. And mother nor father had any clue. So we too have to teach parents what sort of signals to look for. Because they display it, you know. They display it. I mean, the lips get discolored and the fingers and all sort of stuff. But if you don't teach them, how would they be able? Because they'll be the last person to suspect that the children doing something wrong. And even when they know, they try to keep it under the carpet because they feel it would bring shame and disgrace to the family. But then at the same time, they're not seeking help for the young man.
And as well, in the addition to the warning signs that someone may be, under the influence, drinking or even smoking marijuana, they have other warning signs. You have the aggressiveness, the anger, the irritability that this person will show. You have the mood changes, maybe you have the energy level changes. You also have changes in the appetite and, sleeping habits, as well as difficulty focusing and feeling restless or on edge. So these are all warning signs that can be easily picked up by the parents, teacher, or the doctor. Like, okay, there's something wrong here with this person. And then we can further investigate what the problem is.
Now, what are some of the recommendations that you would have for men in terms of how they can take care of their health?
Well, for me, personally, and for everyone in the general public to know, we first have to acknowledge that there's a problem. As soon as we acknowledge that there is a problem, the next step is asking for that help. Break down the barriers of the false thinking of, being vulnerable, being weak, and go out and ask for help. Now, when we, face our fears, we ask for help, then is how we'll be able to start expressing feelings and openly talking to our healthcare providers about what's actually happening to us. So in order for us to move forward from this point, we have to, education and, that openness and that willingness to express how we're feeling will go a far way. But we first have to get over the stigma by asking for help, making the first step, rather. And from there, we'll be able to do everything as it relates to our health. We're able to take a greater control. We're able to have proper treatments and live happier, healthy, longer lives.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to take them on a guilt trip. You got to give them the blunt facts. Most of the time when you find persons involved in substance use, they tend to become less productive. They don't even want to get up to go and work.
Right.
So you have to say to them that there's an aspect of our socio-economic situation where you make contributions into Social Security. And just like how the persons who went before your parents, they are now benefiting because of the contribution that your parents made. You now would have to contribute in order for your parents to benefit.
Right.
Because, unless what? Your parents would work until they're 200? You contribute in order for your parents and your grandparents to reap benefits from Social Security. If there's this void in the contribution, nothing would be there for your parents, or even your teachers who teach you so well in school. Nothing would be there. The Social Security would just dry up. And then what would happen? We have a society that would be malnourished, unhappy. We would not be a touristic society anymore because we wouldn't be producing that smile. Touristic society is supposed to be, you have this smile, radiating smile that will resonate with the tourists and say, yes, we are feeling welcome. Mm-hmm. But if you are unhappy, you're disgruntled, you're not even eating well, how can you provide even a brick in a touristic society? You have to let them know they're guilty. You're not making any contribution. You want to go to the hospital and you want to be looked after freely. There's a cost to it. Sometimes we have to let them know the cost. I don't know why the government would not do this. Tell us the cost of looking after a patient on average at the hospital and to what extent the government has to subsidize it. A lot of subsidization takes place at our medical facilities. And if you only let them know They would stop incurring injuries on people, and they'll get a better understanding. Look, if I don't look after my parents, if I don't be there for my children, well, if you're not there for the children, how the children will contribute to make sure that you, in turn, is a really? How would you benefit if you're not looking at making any contribution? And those aspects of our society where persons are being rewarded for work done, but yet no contribution is made to Social Security, we have to get on top of that. Everybody should be making a contribution.
Yes, I totally agree. And part of the issues of men, you know, the responsibility, making a contribution to society, taking care of their children,
Right.
the whole issue of being a responsible father. I think even though those things do not really speak to physical health, they speak to social health and mental health.
Right.
Because if you have a right frame of mind, then you will be a responsible man. You will be a responsible father. You will be a responsible citizen within the society in terms of the contribution that you make towards the society. And all of these things, I think, too, are issues pertaining to men that speak to the health of men. They speak to the health of men. The way that you think.
Mindset.
Your mindset.
Right.
You know, your worldview. Because here it is that we are speaking about men's health. But there's a particular worldview when it comes to men's health. And I have a perspective on health and how I view health. But is my perspective a healthy one? Is my mindset a healthy one? Because if my mindset is not a healthy one with respect to my own health, then it starts in my mind, and so therefore my actions would not be actions that would be in the best interest of my own health.
Right.
I know that in the Caribbean on a whole, they say that we suffer with NCDs, non-communicable diseases. That's a biggie.
It's a huge one.
Right? Where is the heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, and things like that. Now, what I want you to tell me, Dr. Carty, is there a higher prevalence among males than females when it comes to NCDs?
Yes, there actually is, because as we've been discussing this whole time, we will have the problems and won't seek the help. So we will find there are a great number of males, especially male of color, like ourselves. We will be prone to hypertension, diabetes, and other NCDs, and not seek the appropriate help. So we as women will gonna go and get help. We won't. We will stay and suffer in silence. And like I mentioned earlier, a lot of these things can be prevented by our habits, how we live our daily lives. So that is why we will suffer most. We will have the most illnesses because we don't go out there. We don't do our research. We don't seek that advice. So, and in terms of hypertension or high blood pressure, that in of itself, we call it in the medical field the silent killer, because it can not only damage your heart, it affects the brain, it affects the lungs, it affects the kidneys, it affects your sight, it affects, the extremities. So we as a woman will be able to easily, control do their diet, do their exercises, and seek medical attention. We will just try and sweep it under the rug. We will try and tough it out. And a lot has to do with our eating habits and our lifestyle. Just like in the case of diabetes, the large consumption of sugar, the sweets, the eating habits of all sort of hours, the high cholesterol meals, the saturated fats, will always be higher than women in terms of the NCDs, because we're not looking after ourselves in terms of health than a woman would. So we will ultimately suffer the consequences, which unfortunately to most of those is death.
So you're speaking in terms of, we also have to speak in terms of prevention.
That is one of
preventative measures.
That is one of the
checkups.
That is one of the
Men
most.
don't like to go and get checkups.
They don't want to know. They prefer not to know.
They prefer not to know.
I would like to get in there, though, Mr. Williams, with respect to, you have a lot of single-parent homes. And when we speak of single-parent home, most of the time it's a female. And sometimes I feel our court system is a bit guilty of nurturing a particular culture. Because what you do is you take a male to court for child maintenance. You say, well, give $80 a week. And that $80 is given religiously. Sometimes you have to pull and a raise a reach up like 10,000, I wonder. You know, when this thing happens, how could your raise reach in thousands? And then the court will just say to you, well, you have to pay up their raise. What happened to the child in the interim? Was the child comatose so that they don't have to be fed or anything? You know, we have to be careful. And then when summertime, and the children would have played and getting ready to go back to school, it is still the same $80. When you have to go buy uniform, buy books, buy shoes, how could somebody with a conscience still give a single parent, you're not a part of the house, the same $80 coming on to the first term of the school year? It is not right. And some of them, even though they make sure that they don't want to be exposed, of course, by the square, so they make sure they give the money on time. But what happens? You go and you deliver the money, you turn off. So the child now feels as if there is no love coming from the father. Right. And with no love coming from the father, there's always a group that is willing to embrace that child. Embrace that child. And he said, well, since I get an embrace here, there's no need for me to go to school, I stay here, lime, drink my rum, and I also get involved with my smoke. All these are ramifications of fathers who just drop off money. Not even a little walk to the park. You understand? And until, as a culture, as a people, we change that, we're going on a slippery slope. It must not be. The order at the court must be, you pay the $80 and you come for the child at least 3 days out of 7. Take the child wherever you want to go, bring back the child safely. We have to start mixing those monetary orders with more social orders. Come and do some homework with the child. Come and do this, come and do that. Let the child know that it is fully embraced.
Right. Again, I think that comes from sometimes how men are socialized within the society to believe that the mother or the woman is the primary caregiver and that the man's role. But we are seeing a change in that recently in society. We are seeing more men being involved in the lives of their children. More emotional involvement. More emotional involvement. Sometimes you see them, they have their sons at the barber shop, or you see them taking them for walks and things like that. Mind you, we still have a great way to go. And there's more of that that needs to be done. But you are right. I don't think it is just a financial obligation that you have to a child, but you have to get involved in that child's life, the emotional involvement, the social care, and the relationship aspect of it. Your relationship to that child is extremely crucial.
Definitely.
You being a role model for that child and being there for that child is absolutely crucial.
It is.
And so all of these things, I think, have to do with health. Men's health issues. It's not just the physical, but you have to look at the social. You have to look at the emotional. You have to look at the something we haven't touched, the mental, and we have to look at the spiritual. The spiritual. Sometimes we don't want to, men don't like, and I'm not just talking about going, because spirituality and religion are two different things. I'm not just talking about going to church, but what do I feed myself with? Do I feed myself with negativity? Do I feed myself with positivity?
Right.
You know, all of these things can really affect a man's health. Who are the people that I surround myself with on a daily basis? My company. The philosophies that I inculcate or that are inculcated into me, and so on. these affect a man's perspective on life, his worldview, his actions, and all of that. What do you say, Nita?
The great philosopher once said that a person is a mind with a body, not a body with a mind. So therefore, the mind must be in control at all times, at all times. The further went on to divide the self into 4 selves. They call it the Jojo-Harry window. The known self, the unknown self, the hidden, and the blind. And some of us will have to learn to listen to people more. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth because he wants us to listen more than how we speak. So you must take some time out and schedule some listening time, because the known self is what you know and others know about you. That's the known self, according to the philosopher. The hidden self is what you know about you that you don't allow others to know. The blind self is what others see about you that you can't see about yourself. So that you have to listen. And then the last part that is so crucial is the unknown self. The unknown self you don't know about, and other person, your friend or your family don't know about. So very slowly you find somebody doing something, and you hear their friends and no, not Peter at all. Because we don't expect, Peter himself will say, I can't believe I do that. That is the unknown self coming out. Because you don't know about it, and your friends and your family don't know about it. Only when something might have taken place, they can do some extrapolation and say, well, this was inside of you. But that is why we have to listen. Right. And when you get a chance to nurture somebody, because of that unknown self, you have to make grounds on it before it takes over an individual. I went to see somebody at the time who committed murder at the station, and the person looking at me, I did not believe that the person did it, because I would have just left the place there about 2 hours ago. And the person looked so confused, as if I did this, and I looking at him and say, you did that? That is the unknown self. Right. So we got to be aware that certain things about people that we don't know. So whatever we can mold and nurture, we must mold and nurture them.
And in addition to that, I absolutely agree with you in terms of the listening and the speaking, because sometimes all a person may need is someone to talk to. Like, take the time out to listen to what someone may be going through, and they will be able to express, okay, I am having this issue, I'm having that problem. And in doing so, it could prevent someone from whether it be committing suicide, murder, because sometimes all they need is just a shoulder to cry on, or just to be heard. Basically, just to be heard. And we ourselves as men, we don't like to do that. We have to figure out a way to be able to express ourselves to other persons and just get things off the chest, for say.
Yeah, and I think an important aspect of the whole thing with men's health is just what you mentioned. We have to have positive role models, celebrating positive role models. And sometimes men can mentor men. There's nothing wrong with that, with men mentoring men,
right?
In a very positive way. And that can help greatly in terms of men's health. It can help greatly in terms of men dealing with their issues, because there are some issues that men better understand than women, I think. And this year's theme for International Men's Day is basically better relations between men and women. And that's why I began, and I said, we're here to talk about men's issues, but you cannot talk about men's issues in a vacuum. Somehow women have to come into play. And we speak in terms of, Nital, you can speak a little bit, elaborate on these things. Men in dealing with anger management issues, self-esteem issues, relationship issues, conflict resolution, better relations between men and women. We speak about these power plays in relationships, dominance, gender-based violence. And oftentimes it's the man exerting his power, or his so-called power, over the woman in terms of gender-based violence. Not that women don't do it to men, because they do it too, you know. But all of these issues pertaining to men and men's health.
Let me come in there. You know, it is interesting because ears, we spoke about the ears just now. And you have to ask yourself, who are raising our males? Who or what are raising our males? Because you could have a home that is in order, all ducks well aligned, instructions obeyed, but then 24 hours within a day. What about when they go to school? What about what they're listening on the radio? You might say that you do not want your children to be listening to a particular type of music, but then you buy devices for them to plug their ears. So right in your home, they could be listening to the stuff that you told them not to listen to. You have the DJs on the radio playing certain types of music. And when I listen to a song, I listen to the lyrical content of it. And when you hear the instructions being given, and you could see it amongst our females a lot too. If you say bend over, 6:30, whatever. And the guys, them are not different. They're carrying out the instructions. So sometimes we wonder if there's a need to censor some of the songs that we expose our children to. You go to a sports day, and the type of songs that the DJs are playing, they're non-conducive for the best development and positive development of the children. So you have to first list who and what are raising our children, and we try to adjust them. We can't adjust them collectively because all of them would have their unique makeup. When we start to adjust those persons and situations or activities that are bringing up our children, then we'll get closer to working on the self-esteem, the anger management, and we need guys to start to be going home. Too many of our males, they have houses. What we need to develop would be homes. When you had a hard day's work or you had some challenging situation, some hard talk, you need somebody to go home to have a discussion. Right. Sometimes the female is more calming than the male. I mean, in recent times, you have some of them doing just as vicious. But on average, you have a female that would give you an A and tell you plain out, honey, that is not the correct thing to do. Go to the police, make a report. Because out there, the lesson is that strong men, you made a thing the other and said that males don't cry. Or boys don't cry. But males have an added layer of jeopardy in that the older guys will tell the younger guys, big men don't cry. So here you have the world telling you that boys don't cry, but then within the male construct, you have the older males telling the younger one that big men don't cry. So you need for them to be guided properly. I feel so nice when I have somebody that I can just let on with. Relationship ain't mean get ready to carry out your conjugal duties. Right. Yeah? It's not that. You have somebody who you can talk to. Because if you don't have somebody who you can talk to, you're with the wrong person. That is what you call incompatibility. Right. And maybe when the Bible spoke about being equally yoked, by extension it means things like that. Because you can't be into chemistry, somebody into Chinese, and you feel I live in a happy life, eating food. But then when you try to explain anything, you don't know any Chinese.
You must have something.
So the communication.
Right. You must have something
in common.
You must have something in common. And what you have in common cannot just be your love for sexual intercourse. That will not keep a relationship.
Companionship is what we need.
It is companionship.
Right. Companionship. Right. And that is lacking.
Because intimacy does not necessarily mean sex. But sometimes we think that intimacy is actually sex.
Your intimate information that you wish to share with somebody that you wouldn't share with somebody else.
Right. And these are some of the issues. Now, in terms of, we're back to the health of men, physical health. What role does exercise play?
Well, in terms of the physical health, exercise play one of the major roles in the fact that it not only is a good source of stress relief, it helps you to burn that anxiety, burn out that frustration. You may have a hard day at work, you go to the gym, or even at home, you just work out and you relieve that stress. It helps in reducing hypertension. It works in, just making you physically fit, mind, body, and soul. It really plays an important part, and everyone, including myself, needs to be more physically active and take an active role in exercising. It doesn't have to be gym exercise. It could be walking. It could be, riding bikes. It could be any sort of physical activity, playing some sort of sports or what's not, to keep yourself, because it would not only keep you physically healthy, it will keep you mentally healthy as well, and it could keep you spiritually healthy because it creates that clarity. It gives you that that space, that mindset. You can breathe more freely because when you feel good, you think good and you perform well. So exercise is a major factor in reducing a lot of our health issues that affects men today, and it is something that should be adapted as a part of our daily routine.
What do you think we can learn from women in terms of how to take care of our health?
Spending more time in the mirror. I'm going to speak about the mirror, just not the physical mirror, but having a reflection of yourself almost on a daily basis. I felt at 6 inches today. By 10 o'clock, I felt 6.5. You must have a comparative analysis to carry. You reflect upon how, you see, you have to know yourself, Sometimes you might even be a better indicator of even when your pressure is high, outside the norm. Because you become so intimate with yourself that, no man, I'm feeling that, I need to go and take my pressure tablets. Or it might be very high, so I need to put one under my tongue to make sure I bring it down in quick fashion. And you could tell when you're trying to look at something and it look blurry, the resolution is poor. That means that my sugar might be a little bit up too much. You have to become intimate with yourself. And that is what you find most females do. Most females are very, very intimate with themselves. They know how every single part of them function. And they know how they feel. You understand? So if that is a lesson, you see them in the mirror, but even though they're in the mirror, they're just not looking at their faces. The eyelashes extended 40 feet in front of them sometimes. They're just not looking at that.
I don't want to sound like Sigmund Freud.
Sigmund Freud, yes.
But a lot of his theory was surrounded by what we call the libido.
Mm-hmm. The ability to be up, yes.
The ability to be up.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you spoke about the hypertension and the diabetes and how those affect men. And they affect men's sexual health.
Definitely.
And sometimes taking these medication affects that aspect of a man.
Correct.
Correct.
And some men do not want to take these medication because of the side effect. Dr. Pat.
That is a great point that you're making. Because that is an excellent point. Because some of these hypertensive or diabetic medication or medication given to treat other illnesses will have secondary side effects. Some may include erectile dysfunction. And if I take the pill today and realize that this is what's happening, I would not want to, well, some men would not want to take it again because they want to be able to maintain that libido, as you just mentioned, always be on the point where you can readily, perform and fulfill your duties. But we need to understand by doing this, we are damaging ourselves further, because not taking the hypertensive medication will cause the hypertension to increase, and you will lead to more severe chronic stages of the disease, which will ultimately lead to stroke, heart attacks, and death. Like Nital mentioned, we have to become in tune with our body to know when something is wrong. Because when you do this, you'll be able to, okay, I'm not feeling wrong, I'm not feeling right. something is off. Let me check this or let me do this. And then we go and we find what the problem is. We find the culprit, and then we're able to quickly attack it and resolve the solution. But if we are out of touch with ourselves, we will miss all the signals that the body is showing us and screaming at us like, hey, this is happening, like, look at me, like, do something. We'll completely miss those warning signs and go one way, and our body is telling us to go the next way. And we'll find ourselves completely, it would be a complete disaster, so to speak. But persons do not want to take these medications because it will have the secondary side effects, and that is the side effect that they're more concerned about. They're more concerned not in getting healthier or getting better, but how they could perform in the bed. And to most men, having an active sex life is more important than their actual health. So they would risk having strokes, heart attacks, or even kidney problems, vision problems, renal issues, just because they want to, have that moment of pleasure.
You have guys who will tell you they'll wreck their body to save their name.
Right.
I wreck my body to save my name.
Let's take it there. I am not wrecking my body to save my name. But we are going to go to the phone lines.
Oh.
And the numbers to call are 466-2666, 466-2666, 662-8674, 662-8674, 767-4765, and the overseas number is 1-239-645-4500. 1-239-645-4500. We welcome your calls. Mr. Nichel.
Now, Dr. Cathy, since they realize that a major side effect is what we spoke about just now, why the pharmacologists would not take that into consideration and reduce that impact as they become more modernized in their techniques and their knowledge? Because you have a variety of pressure pills.
Right.
And what might work for you might not work for me. It might give me side effects that I can't stomach. I can recall a friend came to me and said, well, I teach, I not sacrificing my bedroom life for no pressure, And I did a little research and I realized that he could have taken graviola from the south up and bring about the reduction, or maybe even garlic or whatever. And he substituted incrementally, and he's high praise now. He went down on the prescribed medication and went up on the graviola and the little garlic. And he has a happy life.
I'm glad you mentioned that point, because a lot of us think that these diseases can only be controlled by the recreational drugs and medication. And sometimes simple plant-based substances can do the trick. I mean, some garlic tea, some soursop, guava, they teach like it would not have the immediate effect like the medication will have, but in time and with the proper regime, they will actually help in reduction of anxiety, stress, depression, hypertension, as well as diabetes. There are multiple drugs out there to treat different illnesses, but the thing is, the drugs are fashioned, and they are fashioned to help the different types of individual, because what may work for a white male may not work for a man of color. So there are particular drugs that I will be able to take and somebody else will not be able to take, because it would not be effective for me like it would for you. So they have to take all this into consideration when manufacturing different types of drugs, and that's why there are a variety. In terms of the hypertensive medication, there are medications that are for specific task. For example, one that may be directly indicated towards controlling with heart pumps, and others may be indicated to increase the diameter of the arteries, or to make them contract more better, or be dilated. So the medications are developed targeting specific receptors of the body as it relates to controlling certain diseases. So that they do take all of that into consideration, but they also have to include a person's age, sex, like I just mentioned earlier, the gender, the race, and how the body reacts to that medication, because something that may be beneficial for me, I may also be allergic to that medication and not be able to take it, and have to take the medication that would have the secondary side effect. And
Yeah.
we'll have to find ways to work around that and go towards the non-pharmaceutical ways of dealing with certain issues, healthcare issues.
I think that is where the scientists would have been at right now with respect to evidence-based treatment.
Right.
It's an integrated approach. You do whatever you have to do to get the individual, all the attributes, qualities, characteristics of that individual factored in or integrated into the treatment process.
Right.
So what they would work for you would not work for me, and as such, the evidence-based treatment would take all that into consideration with a support group and everybody who should be key to that particular treatment. And you're correct, the integrated approach.
Right.
Right. And now we have the COVID-19. That's the big thing today.
Right.
And how that impacts on men's health and men's health issues. And one of the things that I read in WebMD, I mean, people who are diabetic and people who are hypertensive are more at risk.
Mm-hmm.
And what would be the message to men of how to take care of their health with respect to COVID-19? One of the things I read is that men who get COVID-19 are 6 times, or erectile dysfunction risk is 6 times higher in men with COVID.
So you have to encourage them. They call them underlying factors.
Right.
Each one of us would have a personal physician, family physician, who would guide us. They might say, look, you can take it, but you must let sometime you will experience these side effects. Once you explain to people what the side effects are and they anticipate getting these side effects, when they come on, they wouldn't be like a bolt from the blue causing them to say they will not take the second dose. You understand? But I think, though, that people should be encouraged.
Right.
If you definitely cannot take it, you cannot. But once there's a probability, you have to ride that probability wave and see where is the peak of that probability wave to say, yes, you can take it, but with certain precautions. Because you might need to do certain things when you finish. A lot of people develop a fever. Nobody said to them, take some paracetamol. Because paracetamol good for the removing of fever, the taking down of the temperature. Something we just don't dialogue sufficiently. And maybe those who administer the vaccination should have some sessions with people, let them know what to expect. People are already panicking and they're kind of apprehensive, they have their phobia. But if you could only say, well, this would happen, and it happened, they got a lot of confidence. They might come back for 5 doses.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree.
Just talk to people.
I agree with you. The first step is getting your underlying healthcare issues checked out by your private practitioner, your doctor, because we see that the COVID-19 virus will quicker affect someone that has underlying healthcare issues, whether it be, especially those who have underlying pulmonary, lung-based diseases. It will greatly affect them more than it will affect someone who is like healthy. So, the hypertension, the diabetes, any sort of immunocompromised issues that the person may have. So the first thing in addressing this issue is that they will have to have a sit-down with their private practitioner, like, okay, am I at risk of contracting this virus? And if I do, would my underlying issues be a problem? So you have to make sure that you have the diabetes and the hypertension controlled. And now we have the vaccine, which has been proven to be effective in the controlling of the spread of the virus. And persons should, I know, as Nita mentioned, it's a fear and a lack of information, but now we have so many sources of information. We have the 311 hotline, we have doctors and nurses at the hospital, we have our health centers, and they actually do have a questionnaire when one goes to take the vaccine, asking you, okay, you have these certain health conditions you take, and you'll be advised whether to see a doctor first, take the vaccine, or take it with precaution. And after taking it, you have to wait there for maybe 30 seconds or so, just to make sure that you don't have no secondary side effects that would prevent you from going on to taking the second dose. So people have to be able to have that information to be able to get over the fear and the panic, like, oh, I'm going to take this and something's going to happen to me. I mean, I'm fully vaccinated and I'm here still today, and I'm actually working in the COVID side of the emergency room, where I have seen persons both vaccinated and unvaccinated with the virus, and you can see the marked difference in how that person evolved with the virus, and in terms of whether there was they were vaccinated or have an underlying healthcare issue prior to contracting COVID-19. So yes, I would advise the persons to have a talk with their doctors, and if they are healthy enough and they have no underlying contraindications of taking the vaccine, it should be something of priority.
But if your message was the only message, that would have been bingo. But when you have misinformation and disinformation,
Right.
the person now would have to go through with a fine-tooth comb, and it's who they believe in.
Right.
Because you have some persons believe in certain persons who appear in social media, on the radio, and different
Definitely.
programs. And regardless of if they now come and tell them 1 and 1 is 3, despite the years of knowing that 1 and 1 is 2, they would have a tendency to try to believe.
Definitely.
So how do you counter that? You understand? You try to send a message, which is good, and it's a bingo, if that was the only path.
Right.
But it's like a drunken sailor. You're seeing 10 roads ahead of you, and that is why they stagger.
I agree.
I don't want to travel every road.
I agree.
And some people are very gullible. They
Right.
don't take time out to maybe get a second opinion. If this person from this side said that, well, it got to be that, even though it's wrong.
I agree, because
Yeah.
they have a lot of like media influencers, a lot of YouTube influencers, Facebook influencers that have millions of followers, and people look up for these people to, be their, in a sense, their savior, to show them the right path, the right way. So if you have someone that is against the vaccine, then you have the masses listening to those persons and be like, okay, I'm not taking it because this person said this, that person said that. Like you mentioned, there are a lot of misinformation out there being fed through many of the social medias, and as you mentioned as well, people are gullible and they will go with the first thing they hear. They will not take time to discuss it with their doctor, figure out, okay, hey, I heard this. Is it true? Am I at risk? What is the benefits of this thing?
But
Yeah. One of the reasons I raised the issue of COVID-19 is because we have said on this program that men are less inclined to look after their health. And they may be less inclined because of that to go and take the COVID-19 vaccine. That's also a possibility. But at the very same time, in the context in which we are today, part of looking after one's health definitely would have to take measures to mitigate against contracting the COVID-19 because of what it can do to your health. You mentioned the underlying conditions. And one of the things I mentioned, there are certain things specific to men. For example, it can cause erectile dysfunction and things like that. And so therefore, men have to take their health into their hands and make sure that they get vaccinated to protect their health.
You're correct. But there's an economic side to that. Men are usually, by a margin, the breadwinner for families.
Right.
And they realize that, look, my madam, she works at this place, they would have been laid off. I'm the one who's solely responsible for putting bread on the table. And those with conscience would realize that if I have to go and take the vaccine, I'll have to go and do it to put bread on my table as well.
Right.
So quite apart from the prostate and every other thing else, that economic factor would cause a lot of fellas, a lot of gentlemen to go and be vaccinated. And you see, Dr. Wilkinson composed that Calypso. Don't know if you have heard it.
The new one?
The very new one, yeah, with
I haven't heard the
Maui
new
singing
one.
it. And he indicated on a line, and I would have had discussions with him, that there are a lot of hypocrites because they rush to be vaccinated, but then they come out and convince you that you shouldn't take the vaccine. That is inside the Calypso, and that is a very strong point, and that is true. People would have already protected themselves with respect to the future projection, but yet they're telling you don't go, and they would have already taken the vaccine.
Yeah, but that is very unethical.
Yep.
And that is very selfish.
That is, yep.
It is really selfish. So in other words, you don't. It's not about just caring about myself, but about caring about my community.
Of
It's not
course.
just about self, but others. Why would I
Right.
take the vaccine,
And then tell you don't.
knowing that it's protecting me, and then tell you don't take it? It just doesn't add up.
Crazy.
It is the height of selfishness. Really.
That is true. Even in school, the person would tell you, oh, I didn't study for this test, but in fact they stayed up all night studying and they passed. And they're like, how you passed? You didn't study.
because they don't want to see you succeed.
Competition.
Exactly. So
They don't want to see you succeed.
But in this case,
there is a phenomena that they call, you're speaking about success in terms of tests and so on. You reach at the top of the ladder and then you kick it down.
Right.
You kick down the ladder because nobody else must attain what we would have attained.
How would you get down? Because you have to come down, you know. Regardless of where you are, you have to come down.
You have to
come down.
Dr. Carty, what are some of the foods? Are there foods that are particular to men's health in terms of vitamins and so on that can help with men's health, as opposed to women's health? Because there are some differences in terms of how men and women are made up, in terms of their bodies and their dietary needs and things like that.
Well, I would normally tell my male patients to, stick to grown provisions. The yam, the papayas, the yams and the eddos and the pumpkins and the potatoes. The more we go closer to the earth, the better it is. The more in terms of vitamins and minerals, we have all our fruits and vegetables. We have and it doesn't affect. It goes both male and female. It's not like, okay, an apple is more important to me than it is to a woman, because it will have the same impact. It may have a greater impact on one than the next, but it's going to still deliver that source of vitamin and mineral. You have your apples, your oranges, your grapes, all of the vegetables and the fruits. And I encourage these patients to go out, even to drink coconut water, keep themselves hydrated with fluids, and instead of having to constantly take medication, you can also look for your source of vitamin and minerals from the ground in terms of the fruits and the vegetables. So I would recommend all fruits, the melons, everything, soursop drinks, everything. I would recommend everything for them because it will help them both. Right.
I know there are certain things in terms of prostate health, like lycopene or lycopene.
Lycopene.
They're saying that in terms of men using tomatoes and processed tomatoes, that they are good for the prostate, for example.
Yeah, they have been research that links tomatoes to. I've heard that growing up because I personally don't like tomatoes, but then you hear it's good for the prostate. It's good for the prostate. You need to learn to like these things because it is beneficial to your health. And persons have done the research, seeing that the elements and the components of the tomato actually aids in the proper functioning of the prostate and could prevent progression to cancer. But the thing is, there are so many other factors involved in developing prostate-based issues. There are a lot of different risk factors, not just what you eat. So sometimes it has to be like a comparison, like, okay, I'm going to be doing this, but I also have this thing that is opposing me that could eventually lead to me getting prostate cancer.
So it is a multifactorial.
Yeah, it's multifactorial. I could eat all the tomatoes in the world, all the fruits and vegetables, but still have the factor of alcohol, drinking, family history of prostate cancer, as well as being a person of color. All those would other be factors that would, play a major role in making me could lead to the progression of developing, prostate cancer. So it is a multifactorial.
Right. Now, Nitel, what are some of the things that you think pertaining to men's health that can help positively with men's health, mental health?
You need to surround yourself with persons who are positive. When you have the glass with the water, you don't want the persons who say that the glass is half empty. You prefer the persons who would say that the glass is half filled. And those sort of conversations would go a long way. We need to talk more. Find somebody. It doesn't have to be a family member, because some persons get along better and form stronger bonds with friends rather than family. There's always some sort of thing inside that family to fight for. And sometimes it's so trivial. Outside, the person doesn't have any horse in the race, any intention of being placed on any will, so they're willing to talk to you as much as possible. Conversations. And we have to start eating better. When when you live a fast life, I know you're trying to manage a livable income, you must always take time out to rest. You must not only eat right, but you must rest well. And a lot of us do not get rest. And that is what the problem is. And if we get a home to go to, then we can go home and meet some food in a pot instead of rushing somewhere and getting something quickly. And most of those quick snacks or quick food, they don't have the nutritious value that we can actually calculate at home and tell the madam, put a piece of broccoli, put a piece of that. As a matter of fact, if I come from a family that is genetically predisposed for prostate cancer, I'll go to an old lady, have a conversation, and she said, boil this thing in a bush. And it would have worked magnificently for a number of persons. You must do your research to ask. You could get information as a person in the community who might have suffered from prostate. You ask them what they did apart from the medication, like you said, tomatoes. But surprisingly, the gentleman from Antigua, who seemed to be the expert on it, he said having sex at least as often as possible helps the prostate.
Yes.
Mitigate against the prostate probability of further development. I forget the gentleman's name, but he's out of Antigua.
Some of that have been said.
Conversation and research.
Yeah. Right. Some of that have been said. Yes. We are out of time. Is there anything else that you would like to contribute with respect to men's health and how men can better take care of their health?
Well, in closing, all we can put out to the general public is that we need to just learn to ask for the advice and seek the help. It is not wrong. It doesn't mean that we're weak. It doesn't make us vulnerable in terms of asking for help. I mean, we need to get over the stigma and become aware and educated that seeking help and advice from persons who have done the research, persons who are in a position to actually help, will reduce certain mental health issues incredibly in terms of the mental health as well as the NCDs, and in terms of psychologically, just having that close person to speak with, to be able to communicate better with, it would help us and allow us to go a far way.
And our society would have to rid itself of this cultural stigma that once somebody sees a psychologist or psychiatrist, we label them as crazy, and they say once crazy, always crazy. That sort of thing permeating our society is not good. We have to do more embracing. We have to be more sympathetic. We have to be more empathetic. And sometimes some of us, the part of the brain that is responsible for empathy, seem not to be fully developed in a lot of us because the way we treat people with mental illness. And we have to bring it down from the top, pass laws. Why should there be a struggle between the police and the hospital as to where this person should be? Should you put them out of prison or should you bring them to be institutionalized? We have to work on that and we have to embrace them, and after they are released, nothing is sweeter and greater and more effective than family therapy. The embracing of an individual who has a mental health. No medication can substitute for the embracing by a family unit. It goes a long, long way. Some persons even recommend family therapy, and people just take it for granted. We tend to discard our family members as long as they would have had some issue from a mental perspective, because we don't wish to be associated. We even pass them straight. We see rain falling, fire could be dropping out the sky, and nowhere you want anybody to know you're related to that person. And that culture would have to change. That is my
Yeah, you mentioned a very good point, Nital, and we're sorry that we're out of time. We could have elaborated more on it. The whole aspect of stigma and discrimination. I know we didn't speak a lot in terms of HIV and AIDS,
Right.
but there's a lot of stigma and discrimination still with respect to HIV and AIDS. At one time, it was thought to be a gay man's disease.
Right.
And sometimes when you hear someone or a male has HIV and AIDS, you think,
Automatically.
that is correct. But yet you have more heterosexuals than anything else. who have
Cases.
HIV cases. And then the whole aspect you mentioned, you know, the stigma, but then the whole reform and rehabilitation of persons and that sort of a thing, and that seeking help is not a sign of weakness. It's rather a sign of strength.
Right.
Awareness, heightened awareness.
Yeah, because to say that I have a problem and that I need help is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of strength. To cry is not a sign of weakness. To cry is a sign of strength. It shows that you are human, you are vulnerable, and so therefore, but you don't stay there. You can seek help and move on. And a lot of, we look at the prisons, for example, when we talk about men, and our prisons are filled with more men than women. That's another thing, and that tells a whole story in terms of men in our society. And the focus on rehabilitation of our male prisoners, and that's so that when they come out, that they will have a healthy perspective on life and living, and look after their health, you know, their emotional health, how they deal with issues and so on. But sometimes the society does not allow them. And that's, you know, and so therefore you have recidivism. Sometimes people end back, and there's a whole cycle like that. So when we're talking about men's health, we have to look at that whole thing too, in terms of, you know, how men relate to one another, the whole thing of violence and crime, and all of that impacts on the society. It impacts on men's health, and it impacts on the society. When we look at men's health, when we pay attention to men's health, and when men pay attention to their own health, it can only redound to the greater good of the society.
Self-intimacy.
Self-intimacy. Self-intimacy. Because if men don't look after their health, it impacts economically and socially and in all kinds of ways negatively on our society and on the family unit.
Of course.
Definitely.
Productivity.
Definitely.
And all of that in our society is affected when people do not have good health. So I want to thank you very much, Dr. Carty. Jonathan, but people mostly call you Kyle, but it's Jonathan Kyle Carty.
Yes, that's right.
But that's the name that I was sent, and you work in the accident and emergency area at the Joseph and France General Hospital. Yes. Thank you so much for coming and sharing with us on this important topic of men's health and well-being. And Nitel, thank you as well. Forensic scientists. I've heard about forensic accountants. I've heard about the area of, could you just tell us a little bit in terms of what does it mean?
From a psychological perspective, you take it a little deeper. You raise red flags. You make people aware, like if you have the police force, for example, you got what you call fit for duty assessment. You might have somebody whose vacation is due in December. You're looking at the person in April. You make a recommendation, look, you got to pull that vacation forward. And this person would not be as effective. You'll get diminishing returns from the hours that they need to put in. So you raise red flags. You see persons who on a job and wouldn't take vacation for 10 years, apart from the possibility that they might be trying to protect some paper trail, is that they're wrecking their bodies, because you must get rest. You got something they call the circadian rhythm. Your body got to develop a rhythm, and if it go out of sync, then it impacts your brain, and that is what my PhD is going to be about. Persons who get insufficient rest, what will be the impact on our brain?
Right. Okay, well, thank you to both of you very much for this very interesting discussion, and a discussion that I think that we should have more of in our society. Thank you to all of our listeners to our program today. Next week we'll be back with another edition of Working for You. Until then, I am Lesroy Williams. Take good care.